So welcome everybody. We're going to be learning about farming today. I'm super excited because farming I feel like is the most underutilized tool in real estate because I'm not going to say it's easy, but it is very simple and there's so many leads available. There's so many opportunities for farming and for whatever reason agents just don't seem to catch on, or maybe it seems scary. So I'm hoping today we can get rid of some of that fear, just show you that it can be enjoyable. It doesn't have to be pushy. It doesn't have to be scary. So that would be my main goal today. If I can at least show you that it's simple and it's not scary, then you'll be able to take this information, and there's plenty of tools online. There's almost entire books that have been written about farming, or at least large sections of books. So there's definitely the tools there to do it. So my goal today is that you'll see that it's simple, it's not scary, and although it takes effort, you could consider it easy because it's not salesy. My method is not a salesy approach. You're not going to go to the door and feel like you're selling pest control or alarm systems or something like that. And they might treat you that way at first, but they'll quickly settle in and be like, okay, this person's all right, and I'm comfortable talking to this person. So you'll forgive me. I'm going to look down at my phone every now and then just because there are so many people trying to log in, and some of them are texting me for the password still, but I'll stop doing that in a few minutes. So let's jump right in. Who here is farming or has tried it? So either you currently are farming, even if you're not doing it well, maybe you're trying to do something, you've chosen a farm. Go ahead and digitally raise your hand if your picture's not up, or raise it. For those of you who don't know, there's a little button at the bottom that says reactions. You can raise your hand using that reactions button. Just make sure you take it off so I don't think you're asking a question later. So it looks like a good half of you have at least tried it. Who is still trying? Raise your hand again, or take it down if you're not still trying to farm right now. So that shaves it down to maybe 25%. Who feels like they're being effective and is getting leads from it regularly? And I think that takes it down to none. So that's good. So today's, maybe it's not good, it's good for me. I'll feel like I'll accomplish something today. So I'm excited to do this with you guys. And I guess I better do a quick shout out to Lunetta Home Loans. They'll be providing the gift cards for the fun giveaways today. I usually just give out gift cards when someone has a good comment or answers a question. There's no real science to it, but Paul with Lunetta Home Loans is going to be giving out some gift cards today. So I wanted to give him a shout out. All right, so let's get into it. With farming, there's a couple of things that are essential, and it's just kind of a building block, and I'd write these down if you're taking notes. The first one is frequency of being in front of them, and it has to be very frequent. And I always tell this story, and I really should look up the exact stats before I tell the story, but the principle's the same. There was an area, and it's from the book Ninja Selling. If you've never read that, it's a fantastic book. But there was an area, they just grabbed a random location on the map and they surveyed 1,000 residents in that location and said, who would you use as your realtor? And it was all over the board, as you'd expect, because most people know 10 realtors and most areas aren't being farmed. So I think the highest somebody got was 12 or 13%. And they assumed, okay, this person either lives there and has done enough that they've got a presence there, or they're farming the area, right? So somebody had a little bit of a presence, but mostly it was all over the board. It might have even been as low as 8% that one person had, but it just wasn't a substantial amount. So what these people did for this experiment is they created a fake person. It was a fake picture, fake name, and I don't know how many rules they probably broke in the process, but they claimed it was a realtor and sent out a mailer every week for 8 weeks. And here's what's bizarre. This person never knocked on the door, never said hello, didn't even exist. I doubt it had any Google reviews because they didn't mention that. They probably would have mentioned that as part of the study. But then they did the call again 2 months later, and over 20% said they would use that guy with no relationship whatsoever, never met him in person, just because of the frequency of him being in front of them. They assumed, wow, I get this guy's mailer all the time. It's talking about how he's an area expert. He sends me, that cool clip about the local sales trends. So he's the guy to use. This was a completely fictional character. 20% of that area said they would use him if they hired a realtor. So that's the frequency piece. And that's probably what's most important, because as your farm expands, and it should, you're not going to have time to knock on every door unless you make that your only job and you're handing off all the leads. But in reality, you cannot build a personal relationship with everybody in your farm. It's probably just not going to happen unless you keep your farm really small. So the frequency of being in front of them is the primary thing. And the good thing is that's easy to do. And you could literally do that today. You could call up your title company. I'm pretty sure Traveling Title does it. So you could call Jill or Scott and say, hey, I need, the closest 100 homes to my home. And we'll get into this later, but I do recommend you start with your neighborhood. There's very few exceptions. I've had a few, but there's very few exceptions to that. So say, hey, I need the 100 homes closest to my home, or the 200, 300, whatever your budget is, and just get that from the title company. They can probably get it to you in a day, and you can sign up for, any number of postcard companies today. You could literally have your farm set up and running by the end of the day as far as frequency goes, making sure they get a mailer from you once a month or twice a month, whatever you can afford. Does anybody have questions about that? I mean, really quick, I'll give you a couple of good ones. Boomerang is a good one if they're in your county. That's a good mailer. It's called Boomerang. There's also, what's the one I use, Ben? Do you remember? I know there's American Lifestyles. That's a little more expensive, but they actually just came out with a postcard as well. So I guess they're not a little more expensive now.
Brian, there's one called Sensations.
That's the one I use. Thank you for that. Yep, Sensations is good, and they've got all sorts of options, from jokes to recipes to cartoons, fun facts, whatever it fits your personality or you think your farm will enjoy the most, you can send that out. And yeah, you Google real estate postcards, you'll have 10 other options, but those are 3 that I'm familiar with and comfortable with. So you can have that set up today. That's the easy part. Does anybody have questions about that? Give you a second to think while I get a drink. Good. So that's pretty simple. There's not going to be a lot of questions there because it's just, you're sending a mailer. So getting your farm to the next level, I mean, obviously, if you could send a mailer every week, at least according to one study, which isn't a great sample size, but since they got up to 20%, I assume you could get around 10 to be conservative. So 10% of a 100-person farm and 10 to 20% of them are moving every year. That will pay for your mailer by itself. That will get you 2 or 3 listings in a year, which will probably result in at least 1 or 2 buyers, because most of them are relocating in the state. So that's 4 or 5 transactions plus any buyer leads you get from the listings or referrals you get from that. So it's obviously worth it, even if we cut the number they got in half, if you did it every week. But not all of us have the budget for that. So I would just say try to do it at least once a month, but preferably twice a month, because the goal is to be in front of them every week, but we're going to go over some other ways to do that outside of the mailer. All right, so CE, it's not CE approved, unfortunately. I'm the only one to blame. Most of my classes have plenty of great content, but I just haven't gone through their hoops yet to get CE approved, so I apologize for that. If you drop off the class now, we know that you're just a CE gold digger, so you can't do that. Just kidding. At least it was a private message, so nobody knows who you are. So somebody else asked, anything special we need to do for this? Okay. No, just harass me. If you want me to get it CE approved, just text me once a day until I do it, and I'll finally give in, I promise. So frequency is easy. We got that set up. Now let's talk about the extra things. So the person who indirectly taught me farming taught it to my coach. So I hired a coach. Her name's Debbie DeGroat. Some of you are familiar with her. And she was trained by a fellow who had a farm of 20,000 homes, 20,000+ homes. And most of you are like, that's way too big of a farm. That's pretty much a city or 2 or 3 cities. So really, he just put some mailers out. He didn't have a farm. But he started with a small one and he expanded it. And he was doing all the things we say that you should do. And when he took Debbie out to teach her farming, it was really interesting because they were driving and she's like, so how soon do we get to your farm? And he's like, well, we've been in my farm for the last 2 or 3 minutes. She's like, we're driving 35 miles per hour. What are you talking about? And he's like, well, it starts, at that exit that we got off of, and it goes to the end of this and this city. And she's just like, okay. And she was probably thinking the same thing. Like, okay, so he sends mailers to this farm, but he's not really farming it. Until all of a sudden she started seeing his signs everywhere. And everywhere they'd go, she would see his signs. And he's like, let me take you to one of my favorite areas. And they started knocking doors. And as they knocked doors, the people were super excited to see him. They're like, oh, I haven't seen you in a few months. It's so great to see you. Come on in. And they were inviting him in and telling him about their kids and everything. And what she was most shocked to see was that he was asking them questions about their kids that only a good friend would know. So if you've been to my classes before, you probably know what he did before he left that day. He probably knew where he was going, looked on his CRM, and he's like, I got to brush up on my remembering these conversations with these people. But he was participating. He's like, oh, so is Jimmy doing good? And he's what, sophomore this year? And they're like, yeah, I can't believe you remember that. He's loving his baseball team and blah, blah, blah. And as they're leaving the property, he's like, Jimmy's playing baseball. He's taking his notes and he's going to go back and upload it. But she was just shocked. She's like, you've got this huge farm, your listings are everywhere, so I know it's working, but now you're knocking on doors and they actually know you personally. How did you do this? And he explained, I started small and I worked out a system that worked for me, and I added 50 to 100 homes a year. And I've been a real estate agent a long time, and I've just been expanding it and expanding it. And that's where you want to be. So we're going to go over some of the more personal touches. But the first things first, if you want to farm at all, don't even watch the rest of the class if you're not willing to set up a mailer of some kind, because there's no way you're going to be consistent enough to farm. And it doesn't need to be today. Maybe you need to work on your budget or wait till your next closing, but you have to be willing to do the mailer. So first things first, the mailer, but now let's get into this other stuff. So probably the next best thing to focus on, because it's going to be most time effective, is a neighborhood event. Just like with client appreciation events, that's a good way to kind of blanket cover your sphere of influence normally, but in this case, your farm, with a lot of personal contacts. And that's how I use my client appreciation events. I was the best at it, but I'm not the best at it anymore because I'm so busy calling my contacts all the time, texting them, doing pop-bys. So I use my client appreciation events as a blanket. Like, okay, I'm just going to touch everybody this month through inviting them at least. And if I see them there, I see them, and then I thank them for coming. So you're doing the same thing with a farm, maybe not as frequently. I think twice a year is plenty. Once a year is better than 99% of people that ever try to farm. But it's pretty simple. You find a nearby park, you get a blow up screen, and you do a movie at the park. Hey, retro time, we're going to watch Toy Story 1, or we're going to watch Back to the Future, whatever you want to do. And just throw it up there at the park and get your lender to pay for half. Maybe you get your home inspector or home warranty guy to pay for a little bit. It's totally within your budget. And you can just invite the whole neighborhood. Call it a neighborhood party. And the marketing's great because you can say, hey, as your local expert, I not only like to be a resource to you, but I also like to provide fund opportunities to grow closer as a community. So I'm inviting you to this pizza at the park event, or pizza and a movie at the park. So there's lots of things you could do. You could rent out a theater. You could do a 5K or a fun run or something like that, a fundraiser. We could go on, and I'm happy to bounce ideas off with you during the Ask the Coach hour at 11. But yeah, the event is just great, and it's a great way to slowly start gathering more data, more personal data. Because if you send out the invite to everybody, and on the invite it says, please text here for more information, and all of a sudden you're getting all these texts. Ben can attest to this. We did something similar to this where we posted on Facebook that we were doing a movie event, but we didn't say when. We're just like, hey, we're renting out the theater to do Star Wars The Force Awakens, and if you're interested, text me and I'll get you the times and see if you can make it. And we got flooded with a bunch of texts from people that we knew them on Facebook, but we didn't have their personal cell phone number. So that's a great way to do it. If you can withhold a little bit of information, or even just to RSVP if you don't want to withhold information, but you should get anywhere between 10 and 50 cell phone numbers from one big event, which is huge. You don't have to be creepy and ask them for their cell phone number on their doorstep or anything like that. They're giving it to you because you're providing them value. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? I know I tend to go 1,000 miles per hour when I'm trying to fit things in. Gather data that way, and then gather it again at the event, because sure, you've got their cell phone number, but if your lender or somebody's willing to give away a 30-inch TV or 40-inch TV, you can have a card for them to fill out that has their phone number and email address and street number and address, just to make sure you're matching it with the right people, whatever. But what I prefer to do, a lot of people will say, oh, only one entry per family. Huge mistake. Like you say, hey, you brought your wife and your adult kids. Hey, you all can enter this. I'll even let your little kids enter it. They don't have a cell phone, but go ahead and put their name on it. And how huge is that? Because you're getting the wife or the husband, like it's not just one of them. You're getting both of their cell phone numbers, both of their email addresses. And if they have kids, maybe you can match the last names and put in your CRM, oh, their oldest name is Jimmy and they've got a daughter named Sarah. And all of a sudden you're filling up your CRM with details about a person you just barely met for the first time. And you're gathering data that might take you months to gather from your sphere of influence, but you just got it at this event. So make sure you're giving away something, gathering data throughout, and then you're taking advantage of that data by following up with a text or a call, even if they didn't win. Hey, sorry, we did the drawing and I know you guys didn't win, but just wanted to thank you so much for coming. It was great meeting you. Hope you had a blast. Would you be interested in an invite to the next event? And I love a question like that to get a response back. So it's not just a text blast. They don't feel like, oh, they probably sent this to everybody, but they respond back, yeah, we'd love an invite. Oh, awesome. I'll make sure you're invited, and you're actually having a conversation with all 20 or 30 of them, however many it is. So you can take that same advice and use it for a client appreciation event, because the value is in the follow-up and the personal contact. It's not just in seeing them there. Although, especially with a farm, it does make you look very prestigious. Like, wow, no realtor has ever thrown a neighborhood party for us before. This girl pretty much is the expert. Like, she clearly knows what she's doing. And that's what you want. That's the type of reaction you want from these people. But whenever you give somebody a free experience and they have a good time and you're providing entertainment for their family, it's going to build a little bit of rapport, a little bit of endearment. So the relationship also is starting, not just the reputation or prestige or clout, whatever you want to say. Any thoughts, questions, dad jokes, whatever you want to throw in there? We had Ben and I assisted an agent on our team doing a client appreciation event, and she did exactly what we talked about today. She just did the pizza, movie, and some giveaways. And I know she got at least 2 or 3 listing appointments. I'm pretty sure she got at least 2 deals from that one event, though. So that pretty much paid for her entire event and her whole year's worth of mailers just from that one event. That's not counting the rest of the success she had. We were more coaching her, so I didn't get all the details of if she continued farming or not. But in any case, just from the event alone, she made money, which is great. So those are the 2 that I would start with, because the mailers are set it and forget it. You don't need to worry about it. And then the appreciation event, if you can just schedule it twice a year, you're at least blanket covering the entire area. You're getting your name out there. You're becoming a prestigious expert who throws parties for everybody and getting some face time with a good chunk of them. So if there's not questions, we will continue. Make sure I'm checking the remarks that nobody has anything. All right, so now let's go over to something that's going to take a little more legwork, but it's certainly worth it. And I would say for everybody. I used to say for the younger crowd, but it seems like everybody's on social media now. Well, at least 95% of people are on there. So the next step is to optimally create a page or some sort of group, something that's exciting for people to use. But at the very least, start friend requesting people from your farm. And you need to be a little bit careful with this. Like you'll have their names, so you'll be able to more or less, okay, this person's from, St. George and it's the same exact name. Oh, and it's got the same spouse's name as my list from the title company, so this has to be them. So you can send out friend requests, but you got to be cautious for two reasons. One, don't send out 40 in a day, because if two people report you for friend requesting without like knowing them in one day, Facebook's probably going to put you in timeout for a few months. So I try to send, 4 or 5, get some responses, send another 4 or 5, just space it out a little bit. All right, but don't let me forget where I was, everybody. I got a comment here. For mailers, what do you do normally send out in the mailer? Do you create new mailers? How do you figure out what to send out? So we talked about earlier about sensations, boomerang, the world's most interesting postcard. What other one? Oh yeah, American Lifestyles. Those are some of the good ones you can send out. Also, Presidio provides you guys with a mailer once a month. So that could be your twice a month rhythm, so to speak. You could do the automatic one, and then maybe you could pay your assistant or somebody to print out the Presidio one, fold it up and send it out. And it's usually great content. Jennifer and Steve and I always approve it. We make sure it's compliant and it's got good content in there. So you could use that as a second mailer each month. But at least get one mailer out a month, you could go with Sensations or one of those other ones I mentioned. So back to what we were talking about with the social media. So you want to avoid getting put in Facebook timeout. You also want to avoid just being weird. Like when I send a mailer out or a invite out to somebody, friend invite out to somebody I don't know at all, I like to send them a personal message just so they at least know why. Because otherwise it can come across as spam or this person's trying to hack me. So I usually say, hey, I noticed we live in the same area and I just live down the street on 5710 West. So I just send out a friend request. Hopefully that's okay. If you don't accept, I understand. Like, I just like to send something out so that they know that I'm human and I'm not just doing it out of the blue. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. It's a little bit more effort, but hopefully eventually you're going to have 10, then 20, then 30, then 40 friends within your farm, which is incredibly powerful because then you can start target marketing those people. And you can also invite them to pages. They'll start seeing your posts and you're building a different level of friendship. And if you've ever been to my sphere of influence classes, I teach several different versions of that. You know that social media is a huge way to build relationships. And if you do it right, it can be genuine relationships and not just online superficial friendships. So you can get into those, and if we have time, we'll cover more of that at the end of the hour or into the next hour. But start friend requesting, following on Instagram, following on Twitter, whatever your preferred method is. I prefer Facebook because of the advertising options. I feel like Facebook has become very business friendly because if you have a Facebook business page, you can advertise on Facebook and Instagram simultaneously. And it's very affordable, especially if it's targeted to only a specific zip code or even more specific, just a group of people from a list. So it's definitely worth it to start building those relationships. And while we're talking about that, another set it and forget it thing, it's not nearly as effective as doing it by a list of names, but you can, once you have your business Facebook page, advertise to a specific zip code. So you could at least turn that on, and most people in your farm would probably see it, depending on your budget, maybe once a month, every other month. But now all of a sudden they're seeing you from every angle. Like, wow, I see their ad on Facebook. I see them in the mail. They invited me to this client appreciation event. This person, they clearly know what they're doing. This is the team to use. These are the people for this neighborhood. So social media is huge. There's not enough time in this class to really go over every angle of social media and why we do what we do, but I'm sure we'll have time for a few questions on it and to dig a little bit into it at some point. Are there any specific questions about social media right now before we move on? And I'm being intentional in this. You might think that I'm Well, you probably don't think I'm avoiding it, but you're probably relieved that I haven't talked about knocking doors yet. But it's intentional because I want to show you that you can actually farm without knocking doors. Because I think that's the biggest fear for most people. And it's also the most time consuming. So if you're like, I would love to farm, but I don't have the time to knock on 200 doors every single month, then I want to show you you can at least start farming and get results without knocking doors. If you do the three things we talked about today, that's going to get you some good results. And at the very least, the people that already know you in that area will trust you as a professional more because they might know, okay, I know that Cindy does real estate, but I also have two cousins that do real estate, and Bob around the corner does real estate. And heck, that guy at McDonald's does real estate on the weekends and the evenings. Like everybody has their license. But once they start seeing these things, then you become a professional. And it's the difference between people that just do it and the person who has all the great reviews and all the great advertisements and the billboards. And you're like, okay, clearly they've got it figured out. So you'll at least get the results from the people you know in your area. That's why I always recommend to start with your area, because if you're a nice person and you're not always yelling and cursing out your neighbors, they probably already like you. You're way ahead of just doing a fresh farm where nobody even knows your name. Does that make sense to everybody? I wish I could see more of your faces so I could see some nods. So throw a thumbs up if you could do me a favor. That helps me know that I'm getting my point across. Thanks, Sierra. I appreciate it. And Jennifer, camera's back. Good. Your office is so clean and nice. You should always have your camera up. So those are the non-door knocking ones, and they're effective. You could just do that, walk away from this class, and add several listings a year to your portfolio, which is great. Now, door knocking is so essential because it's where you can actually build a massive database of pocket listings. And I know pocket listing is almost a swear word now because we've been taught the last few years, be careful of pocket listings. But this is different. You're not advertising them, you just know about them. And here's the power of knocking on the doors. When I did my farm the first time and I actually knocked on doors, one, before I forget, it's essential that you at least, it doesn't have to be your whole farm, but pick an area that you knock every single month. And it's important because they're not going to answer every time. So if you knock every month, you'll probably only see them every other month or every 3 months. So knocking every 3 or 4 months isn't effective because then they'll only see you once a year, which isn't the best for building that next level of relationship. But here's the power of door knocking. So the first time I knocked doors, I looked like I was about 13 years old because I already look like I'm 20 and I'm not, trust me. So I looked like I was about 13 years old. I wore ratty tennis shoes, pants that were too big, and a polo. I couldn't afford nice clothes. So I definitely wasn't coming to the door as a professional agent. But I printed out some valuable material, knocked on about 50 doors, and in those 50 doors, I got a lead and three people told me when they were going to move. I didn't get a listing, but three people specifically told me when they're going to move. That's super valuable information. Out of the 10 realtors they know, probably none of them, maybe family, knows what their plan is. But one of them literally said, well, we would move anytime if we could get 600,000. At the time, it was only worth about five. But I was like, okay, statistically, they're going to move in 2 years, or at least be in the position to. The other one told me an exact date. Our son gets back from his mission on, February of next year, and we don't want him to come home to a new house. We want him to come home to something familiar. As soon as he comes home and moves to college, we're selling. We're empty nesters. This house is too big. So that one was like big, giant, bright lights. This is your listing in a year, right? Like you need to come back every month. You need to put them on a mailer. They just told you when they're going to list their house. And they wouldn't tell me if they didn't want me to contact them, right? Like if they thought, wow, I really don't want this person trying to get my business, I'm going to tell them we're never moving. That would be their reaction. So those are just two of the examples. I had another, but I don't want to take too much time with it. But that's the valuable information you'll never get from mailers and all those things, but you will get the incoming calls. So I don't want to discourage you. The mailers and everything's still worth the time and effort, but the door knocking is where you build those relationships. So we've sped through enough of this that I feel like we have a little bit of time to do a script. And as with most of my scripts, there is no script. It's more of a map. I call it a call map or a doorstep map. And the reason I like calling it a map is you have destinations you want to get to on the way to where you're going. So you definitely don't have a memorized script. You don't even have a list of questions. It's more, what do I want to discover on my way to the destination? And it's simple stuff. For a good map for these conversations, it would be, how long have they lived in the home? Do they like the neighborhood? Do they have kids? Like, especially if it's like my neighborhood, there's lots of really large houses. I kind of want to see how old they are and what their kid situation is, because I want to know if they're empty nesters soon, right? So those are three things I want to find out. If there's a way to bring it up without making it obvious, do they have family members who are real estate agents? That would be a huge one to learn. I definitely don't get that at every door because you don't want to just ask that, but there are ways to find out if the conversation extends out. Um, so do they have family members who are agents? Obviously, what's their plan? Do they want to be there long term? Are they going to move soon? Why are they there? Like, is there something that's going to expire that's going to get them out of there? Maybe they love the school district and their last son is graduating in 2 years, and then they work remotely. They could move anywhere in the world at that point. So figure out what it is you want to learn. Those are just a few examples, and create more of a call map or a conversation map rather than a script. I just don't like scripts. But if I were to do some role playing with you, I would, and this will show you that anybody can knock a door, because I definitely don't sound smooth at all. And maybe that's a good thing. It's genuine, it's just my personality. But I'll knock on the door, and right when they answer, I'll say something. And it mainly because of my appearance. I look just like a salesman, people my age. If they're wearing a button-up shirt, you better believe they're trying to sell you something. So I'll start out right away with, don't worry, I'm not selling you solar today. And that kind of, it gets a laugh a good 70% of the time. And there's like, okay, good. I saw you on my ring cam and I was about to tell you I'm not buying solar. I'm like, no, no solar, no pest control. Don't worry about it. No, I'm just a realtor. You may have seen me in the neighborhood, and I'm not trying to get you to sell your house. I just like to be a resource to my neighbors. So I just brought by this report of recent sales in the area. Definitely not trying to convince you to move, but there's lots of reasons you might want to know the value of your house. Maybe it's a good time to refinance, but for me, it's just fun to know what my house is worth. So I brought you by this report. I can just leave it with you if you want. I can show you how to read it really quick. And most of the time they're like, oh yeah, show me how. And I'll open it up and I'll be like, here's the average sales price. Here's the highest price. Here's the lowest price. Price per square foot is in this column. So you can kind of guess what your house is worth. Obviously, this isn't a full-on appraisal or a comparative market analysis, but it should give you an idea. And obviously, this one that sold for $200 per square foot probably had a lot of nice upgrades, compared to this one who sold for 120, was probably dated and maybe a little bit worn out and broken down. So based on your condition and your size, you can kind of guess what yours is worth. And usually they take it from me and they're like, wow, this is really cool. And they'll start looking at it, and all of a sudden I've provided them with something they appreciate and they're very interested in, because most people really want to know what their home is worth, right? So they're just like, this is really cool. And from there, it's an easy question, or maybe just an offer. Just so you know, it's not a lot of work for me. I mean, I've done enough of them. It doesn't take me a ton of time. And I definitely wouldn't pressure you to sell if you asked me to, but anytime you want a detailed one of your home, I'd be happy to do one. That will break it down with all the extra details. It will compare it only with homes that are the similar garage type or home type and upgrades. And that will give you a more accurate idea. But if you're just looking for fun, this is totally adequate. Just my number's on the front there. If you ever want a detailed one, give me a call. And then you're offering to provide additional value with no ulterior motive. You've already provided value. You're not aggressive. You're not like, hey, when are you going to buy or sell? Or do you know anybody wanting to buy or sell? That's not my personality. It works. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but that's not how I farm. I just don't like doing it that way. So you've provided value, you've built some rapport, and you've offered additional value with no compensation or ulterior motive in the future. So you've become a resource to them, a laid back person who's not super aggressive, and people respond well to that. So you've laid the base for a great relationship. Now, this report I send out, it's really simple. All I do is I build a CMA out of my house because it's in the area. And then I print out the CMA with, I zero everything out and I just print out the comparison report and the map report, staple it together with a cover page and take it around the neighborhood. And I'll show you again, either at the end of class or during the Ask the Coach hour, I'll show you an exact copy of some of those that I've done in the past, or at least teach you how to do one. And I'm pretty lazy. I just do that again and again and again because people like it. There's really not a lot of reason to do other stuff. I'm sure I could get more creative and look up articles about how to add value to your home. And the people who aren't numbers people probably would like that better. But for the sake of time and just because it's easy for me, I'll just print out that report once a month or every other month, and I'll go knock on doors. In the past tense, I don't do this anymore, but I just go knock on doors and drop it off. And when you're actually knocking on doors, here's an important tip. You'll eventually learn who's going to suck a half an hour to an hour of your day. So you might start avoiding knocking on that door and just very quietly place the paper on the door and back away, like, please don't answer. I don't have a half an hour right now. But similar with people that were grumpy to you, like, note keeping is so essential with farming. If somebody clearly doesn't enjoy when you knock on the door, just leave the drop off behind, or maybe you don't even do that. Maybe you're like, I wouldn't even want to work with this person if they called me, so I'm going to save the 5 cents per page and I'm not going to print out a list for them. Definitely the realtors in your neighborhood. I never drop off my stuff at their house. So note taking is really important. And you are also keeping track of who answered last month. So, okay, I already talked to them last month. I only have 10 more minutes. I'm just going to drop off the material at their door, drop it off here, but I've got to knock on their door because they still haven't answered. I haven't talked to them at all for 3-4 months. I need to get in front of them. So you're selectively knocking if you're short on time, which is a great way to make sure you're at least dropping off some material and trying to get a hold of people, at least every other month or every 3 months. But you just need to have that FaceTime so they know you're not just an advertisement. You're not some untouchable, like, famous realtor in the area. You actually take the time to go say hello. And I don't want to never pause for questions, so please interrupt me if you need to. But a great time to do this is coming up. So I would definitely start looking up ideas or planning on it. But Christmas or Thanksgiving or Halloween, there's so many cool little treat bags you can put together, like a pop by gift. And it totally takes the edge off of knocking on the door, because you don't even need to leave your business card unless you want to. But you're just saying, hey, just dropping off some treats for the neighbors. Wanted to say hello. I'm Kimberly. Good to meet you. Here's your little treat bag. I'll see you later. That anybody can do that. There's no sales pressure at all. You're not even saying you're a realtor, but you can go a little further and staple your business card to it if you want to be a little more effective. But it's just such a laid back way to knock on everybody's door, even the people you're worried about. And you're just giving them Christmas cookies or whatever. Like, nobody's going to get upset about that.
Let
Go
me
ahead.
make a suggestion. Instead of just a plain old business card, buy a magnet business card, because chances are they'll keep it and put it on the fridge.
Yeah, much more likely to. Or if you want to add double value, you can do a magnet calendar or a magnet emergency contact number. One of the ones that has like the poison control, local police station instead of just 911, local animal control, hospital, stuff like that. So then they're even more likely to put it on their fridge because it's not just an advertisement, it actually has a tool on there. I'm shocked how many people still put magnet calendars on their fridge, because we all have our calendar on our cell phone, but some people just like it there for a quick reference, I guess.
Brian, I've got a great idea. I use Etsy quite a bit. And if you just go out to the website of Etsy or the app and just type in the search realtor and farming ideas, there are thousands of ideas on Etsy you can buy from creators that will sell them to you for $2 or $3 or whatever. And so I've used a lot of things from Etsy.
Yeah, I know a few realtors who use that, and that's a great idea. Thank you for contributing that, because it's usually pretty affordable too. And if you don't have time to put together little gift bags, you can go and pick up 100 of them from somebody. So thank you for that. I've accidentally ignored some comments, so let's jump into those. Scott asked, when knocking doors, do we ignore no soliciting signs? You're trying to trap me with that question. I would never, let me start out by saying I would never suggest you knock on a no soliciting sign door with the intention of soliciting. Having said that, when I drop off the cookies, I myself knock on it. Again, I'm never going to suggest that one of you do it. I'm not going to give you that advice, but I will give my neighbors cookies even if they don't want to be sold something. I haven't been reported yet, and if they report me, I'll probably not knock on their door, because I'll see that they have green fur and they're the Grinch before I knock. So if someone's gonna report you for giving them cookies, then maybe you just have really bad luck. But that's kind of my strategy with no soliciting. I take it more seriously than most because I used to do door-to-door sales. So when I'd go and get my license to knock on doors, I would pretty much agree when I purchase the license that I will not knock on no soliciting doors, and there's penalties for it. In Saratoga Springs, I think they've gone as far as making it like a misdemeanor or something like that. Like, I know people who sell solar who have had the cops escort them out of the neighborhood, like because they got called in Saratoga Springs. But that's why the farm, it's so essential that you build relationships, because just like the do not call list, once you know them, once you've established a relationship, the rules and regulations on that not only loosen, but the odds of them reporting you go to pretty much zero. If you're friends with them, why would they ever report you for swinging by and giving them a market report or saying hello, right? So just be smart, be cautious. And that's again why Christmas coming up right now is such a golden opportunity, Thanksgiving, Halloween, because you can just give them a treat and see how nice they are. Are they the type of people that would report you? Can they become friends that will just enjoy having you pop by and you're not soliciting, you're just visiting a friend? But again, for legal reasons, I will always recommend you do not knock on a no soliciting door. But I can tell you that if they're my friend and they have that on their door, I myself am going to knock because I'm their friend. And I feel like that changes things dramatically. Does anybody else have?
Can I share a perspective on that?
Uh-huh.
I used to market for Costco, and we would go out and we were trying to solicit memberships, and it was business to business. And there was a lot of no soliciting signs on the businesses. And at first I was kind of intimidated by that. But what I started to learn is it means don't sell me something that I don't want. So if, they would always kind of have their guard up, and then we're like, oh, we're from Costco. Oh, come on in, so as long as they perceive you as coming from contribution, you're bringing something that they want in their world, then they're going to probably be happy to see you. But again, with all the disclaimers that you said.
Yeah. I like that idea. And it's interesting because people who sell solar and sell stuff like that, they actually teach their sales reps to still knock on their doors, which makes me a little bit nervous because not everybody wants solar, and they literally are applying for licenses to solicit, which means they signed an agreement not to knock on those doors. I know lots of realtors who totally ignore them and are aggressive at the doorstep. So just be smart, use your conscience, and know what the rules are in your local area. If I was in Saratoga Springs, I'd be very careful, honestly. So you want to definitely know, even go as far as calling the city and be like, what's the penalty for this? Is real estate considered soliciting? They'll probably say yes. But again, I love the holidays. I love cookies. I love that my wife bakes delicious miniature bread that I can wrap up and take around. So it takes off the risk quite a bit. The other question was, I'm in an area of townhomes where I know an above average number of renters probably live. Can you give me an idea of how you would address them while doing this? It's actually a great opportunity to pick up a ton of buyer clients, because most people that are renting have the goal of buying. Whether it's going to be soon or not is something you'll find out as you knock on doors or as you communicate or invite them to events. But I know people who, their buyer pipeline is bursting with opportunities because they live in an area that has tons of renters. So you just change what you drop off. You're not going to drop off a market report to everybody. Maybe you have 2 stacks of stuff with you. And then when you get there, you say, hey, do you own this? Here's a market report. Oh, you don't? Here's some tips on, qualifying for a home, or some ideas on how you can get into a home, or what an average home payment is compared to a rent payment. So you just change what you drop off, but I would still knock on the doors and do the appreciation events and the mailers and all that stuff. Does that make sense, Thomas? Give me a thumbs up if it does. Or if you have a follow-up question. Thanks for the interaction, guys. I really feel better about myself when you add your thoughts and perspective. And as a matter of fact, I got to give away some gift cards. So let's see who's spoken up so far. If you've spoken up so far, minus Ben, because he gets enough attention from me, then send me a little message. I'm going to put Paul's phone number in the chat box. Just text him and tell him you want a $5 gift card. Anybody who's added a comment or asked a question so far, I'm sure he'd be happy to do it. And I don't want to promise something he's not willing to do, but he does have some cool t-shirts as well. So if you'd rather have a t-shirt than a gift card, I'm sure he'd be willing to do that. I just have to look up his number because it's 2021 and we don't memorize phone numbers anymore. I think the most bizarre thing I've ever heard of is that some people don't have their spouse's phone numbers memorized. I'm like, what are you going to do if your phone dies and you're in an emergency? Like, you've got to at least have your spouse's phone number memorized. Or their own phone number. I've run into that a lot too. 358-1334. Okay, so that's Paul's number. If you've asked a question or contributed so far, that's your reward. I probably gave away more than I should have, but I want to reward everybody for participating and making class easier for me. So text him and he'll get that to you. So moving on to the final steps, and this isn't really a step, it's just a reminder. Tracking, note-taking, having a good CRM is what's going to bring this all together. If you do everything we just said, you'll get plenty of business. But once you start taking notes, that's when it becomes very powerful. And it also helps you use a script that makes you look really, really appealing to buyers. So here's something I've said to buyers at open houses who have turned them from leave me alone to we really want to work with you within just a few minutes. And I'll give you a perfect example. So this one buyer, I had a $1.2 million listing in Highland, and this buyer came through with my assistant realtor. I wasn't even the one taking him through because I was showing somebody else through, and they were looking in the backyard, and my assistant comes up to me and he's like, hey, these people won't give me their phone number. I already asked, and they just seemed like they wanted me to leave, so I left. And I'm like, okay, just tell him this. I didn't even go tell him myself. This was a brand new agent. He had never sold a home. I said, okay, just tell him this. Tell him that we work in this area primarily, and we know of 3 homes that aren't on the market right now, but they're willing to sell. And if they want access to those, to come and talk to me. And they were in that house within about 30 seconds. And they're like, here's my phone number. Yes, we've seen everything. We want to know about those properties. And I went and showed them 2 of them. One of them led us through, the other one we just drove by and looked at the outside. And I said, yeah, this person told me he's willing to sell right away if he can get a certain dollar amount. And this person over here, they didn't feel comfortable with you walking through, but they said to come on and drive by, and they're going to be on the market in September. And they signed a buyer broker agreement with me later on. Somebody who was totally like, get out of my personal space. Because I had kept such good notes farming, I had something that nobody else could offer. I had insider information on that neighborhood about everybody and when they're going to sell, how much they need for their houses. If I didn't have agreements with them, agency agreements, technically I knew that as well, that I could share. But it's just such a golden opportunity to have access to a resource that they can't get anywhere else. You've got 5, 10, 15 pocket listings within a 500 home radius. That's huge for people that want to be in that neighborhood. So that will help you on the buyer side as well. And that's for the buyer side, that's great. But for the listing side, it's even more important because, again, just like that guy from the first story, he was asking about their kids. They were excited to see him. It's almost like you're everybody's out of state uncle. You know, maybe they don't see you all the time, but they have this attachment to you. You're a good friend and they know stuff about you. You know stuff about them. And it's just exciting when you pop by. Sometimes you give them cookies, but at least when you come, you're smiling, you're happy to see them, and you're providing some sort of value. So last piece of advice, and then we'll switch to questions. And then as usual, at 11 o'clock, we'll switch to the Ask the Coach hour, which opens it up to any questions about anything real estate related. But last piece of advice right now is, as you're doing this, as you're going around building these relationships, please, please, please try to be genuine. Try to want these relationships. It's just like I teach in all my other classes. We have a really unique opportunity to spend time with people and build relationships and be paid for being a good friend and expanding our friends database or our circle of influence. And it's just so cool when you think about it the right way. When you're knocking on these doors and everybody answers the door and instead of a face, they have a dollar sign, that'd be pretty creepy. I'm sure we've had nightmares like that, but it's just not the same. When you knock on a door and somebody answers and you're like, man, this girl's really cool. I think I could have a great relationship and I want to go on double dates with her and her husband and invite them over to dinner. And you're building real relationships that aren't just based on real estate. One, you'll make way more money because they're excited to list with you because you're a genuine friend and not just a great realtor. But two, you won't even want to retire. You're 70, 80, 90 years old. Like, I love doing this. I love popping by my friends' houses, and I have a buyer's agent and a listing agent. I never have touched paperwork for the last 20 years. Of course, I'm going to keep on visiting my friends. That's the favorite part of my day. It just makes for a longer lasting career. It makes you do less shady things. Realtors who are only in it for the money tend to go into the gray area more often. They tend to break the fiduciary duty more often because it's not their friend, it's just a paycheck. So if they need to do something a little bit in the gray area to get the deal done, they more often do. But I want you to really look at these with an eye towards friendship and genuine connection and not just to money making. And if you do that, your experience will be way better. Their experience with you will be phenomenal. And it'll push those other 9 realtors they know right out of their mind. You're their good friend, you live in the area, you know the area, you're familiar with all the players nearby. And I see their ad every week. Like, they're famous, they're great at what they do. Of course, I'm going to use them. So off the soapbox I step. But that's my last little bit of advice. So let's jump into questions. And then, like I said, 6 minutes from now, or if there's no questions about farming, we'll just jump in right away to the Ask the Coach hour. And that opens up to anything and everything you want to learn about. So take it away. Sorry, what was that? Junie, you unmuted yourself and said something.
Yes, 2 things. It used to be a state health code that you can't cook unless it's a professional. You can't pass out home-baked goods. That's one question. And then with COVID still a pandemic, do you still do the personal contact door knocking?
Well, my first little bit of advice would be, if you, I mean, I don't want to get into a political debate, but if you believe in the vaccine, if you're fully vaccinated, that might change how I feel about it if I was worried about it.
Okay.
Or if you've already had the virus times and you don't feel like you're a danger. But one thing I did right during the beginning of the pandemic, when it started to open up a little bit, like people were a little bit less scared, is I wore a mask and gloves, and I took around a little baggie with a hand sanitizer in it and a business card. And I handed it to him, and there were variations. I advised some agents to do one with some masks and sanitizer or some sanitizing wipes, whatever. And we just wrote down something clever in there, like, nobody keeps you safer during a transaction than us. you know, hopefully this helps you be safer during this pandemic as well. And that, you know, we might be past that. People might be like, yeah, I don't need that anymore, or I'm vaccinated, or I've already had the virus, whatever. But yeah, we were still doing it. We were just being cautious and making sure we were being respectful of people that were really scared by wearing a mask, wearing gloves. And one guy, I knocked on his door and he kind of opened it and stepped back. And I was just kind of like, okay, this guy's really nervous about this. So I also stepped back and I had my little thing and I said, hey, you know, I know the virus is going on, but I still, you know, I'm still out trying to make a living and introduce myself to people. So just want to let you know, I was very sanitary when I packed this up. And as you see, I'm wearing gloves now. I'm going to put this right here. If you want it, great. If not, just let me know and I'll take it with me and dispose of it. And he's like, no, it's fine. Leave it there. So you'll run into that a little bit, but probably not nearly as much as a few months ago. Does that make sense, Junie?
Yes, thank you. How about the baked goods?
You know, honestly, I don't know too much about that. I always encourage people to follow the rules, follow the local codes. So if you've looked into that and you know what the rule is, then I'd probably recommend buying it or paying someone who has a license to just bake up a bunch of them for you. But I'm not an expert on that, so I couldn't advise you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Hey Brian, I do have a question. So I've been delivering flyers in my neighborhood and I've done like 4 or 5. And I actually got a Facebook message from one of my neighbors that I've never met. And she, well, first of all, she posted on Facebook kind of this negative message about receiving flyers. And then I got a message from her saying, look, don't give me any flyers. Do those things actually work, is what she said. I was like, you know, I don't know, but I wrote her address down. I'm not delivering flyers to her anymore, but I'm like, do flyers really work? And what is the difference between receiving a flyer in the mail versus a flyer on your front porch?
Those are really great questions. I'm glad you brought those up. So receiving a flyer on your front porch is way more effective because it's the only thing they're bringing in. So statistically, it gets fully read and observed way higher than something sent in the mail. I still say send something in the mail, specifically postcards, because they don't have to open it. So again, the statistics of them looking at it go up. But when you're pulling something off the door, it's the only thing in your hand going inside. So you'll actually look at it, see what it is, and throw it away or keep it. With mail, you go and get 5 or 6 pieces of mail and you'll go junk, 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 junk. Oh, here's my bill. And then you throw the rest away. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes total sense. And I've actually had some other neighbors commented on her post about, is this really even effective? Why are you guys doing this? And it wasn't directed towards me, but I knew there was some meaning behind it. And they were saying, yeah, what is the deal? Like, I just throw them away anyway. But I like your comment about that's the only thing they're seeing. And it's mostly just about name recognition and consistency, right?
And that's a good plug for the type of thing I drop off because it does add value. They're not going to say what's the point because they actually like getting it because it shows them, even just if they're nosy, oh, look whose house sold for so much. You know what I mean? They're just interested in it. And
the flyers I drop off are generally like for my client appreciation events. So that flyer was for the Shred It. And so I'm providing a service, which I thought was of value, but some people may not see it that way.
Yeah. And to answer their questions, it is very effective. There's any number of studies you could look up, but especially for us, because you're not just hoping you get a sale from the flyer, it's part of an overall strategy. So you're doing the appreciation events, you're connecting on Facebook, you're sending out a mailer, you're knocking on their door. The flyer is just one more way for them to be reminded that you're out there doing what you do. And I've got,
Right.
yeah, go ahead.
Brian, yes, I think I might have already asked you this question, but so as far as the packets of CMA information that you would deliver to just certain people's certain homes in your neighborhood, if the homes are also different and they're not regular, they're not, and the values of the home are also different, how would you do a CMA so quick without, because the homes are so different, the square footage, the style, the acreage type of thing. Well, how could I do something so quick that wouldn't take me really more time than I want to?
It's
Um,
quick. And
do I just practice and become more familiar with the values and just say, based on this and that, my best guess, or not, or not my best guess, but the value of your home would be so close to this, right?
right. And remember, you're not trying to give them a specific value for their home right now. That's something you're offering to do later if they want, right? So you're giving a general overview of the market. And then if they want a specific value for their home, then do that later. But I'm glad you reminded me, because I was going to show you guys an example of what I sent. I'm going to log into MLS right now to show you how to do that. And I'm also going to show you an example of and what I had to do, because it was a little bit daunting to on such a big area and such a big area. So I'll show you what I did with that as well.
And you showed us how to do that last Monday, right?
I think maybe, I don't know if I did both, but yeah, somebody asked a question about farming, and I might have delved a little bit into it last time.
Meaning how to do a CMA and different ways of doing CMAs, remember?
Well, let's start with that, because this isn't a full-on CMA. Let me show you exactly what I do really quick.
Okay.
So when I send this out, this will show you how quick it is too. So I just go to residential full report in the MLS, and I will, let's see, I will grab, I try to make this clear just to start, just so none of my old searches show up. But whatever you're trying to show, if you want to show what's under contract, active, sold, I usually do sold, because that's what most people are curious about, and it's the most accurate data. So all I've done is I've gone to full search, I put sold as the criteria, and then I'll pull up the map, right? So once I'm in the map, I just simply will either put a radius around my house. So I use the radius tool and pick 0.1 miles, 0.2, whatever I need to do to get some good comparables. Or if you've got a specific farm, and say your farm is just this city block right here, you can actually literally use this tool to draw, to draw around your farm. So you're just clicking, and if you only want to have comparables from the farm, you could literally draw around it, right? And then once you've done that, then it will only show you things from that farm. You can do all sorts of stuff. You can use that tool, and then it will only grab comparables from that farm. But I usually do radius. So let's say 0.3 miles from my house. So set criteria. And the leads don't necessarily need to be in the neighborhood, because, I mean, in the farm, because you're just trying to figure out what stuff's worth, right? In the area. And appraisers use everything within a mile. Sometimes they even go further out. So if you're doing, within a mile of the home or within half a mile, it doesn't mean that you have to do it within the farm, because you're just trying to give them an idea of what the value is. Well, once per class, I have to make fun of the MLS. One of these days, they're probably just going to kick me off from ever using it again, because I make fun of it once per class. This is that opportunity where their system is not working. So they should refund me my month's subscription, but I kind of doubt it. Normally, the radius tool would draw a circle around this area, and it would only show me listings within that area. but apparently it doesn't want to work today. Maybe I'll try 1 mile and see if that helps. Set criteria. Nope, still not working. So once you've done that, then it will give you, like it normally does, I'll show you what it looks like. So normally it will give you 5 or 6 options, maybe a little bit more depending on how big of an area you've done or how far back you've gone. I try only to go back a few months because I'm printing this out frequently and I don't want it to always have the same data, but it's also more relevant information. So I'm just going to grab some random listings to show you what I send out to them, because this is just silly and not working to zoom around the area itself. So if I had gotten 5 options, I would grab those and I would then go to reports and I'd do CMA report, but I'm not running a CMA necessarily on a specific property. All I want is to create a CMA packet so I can get the summary analysis and the map report. Those are the only 2 things I want: summary analysis and map report. Then once you print it out, it will look like this. And it's cool because it has the breakdown of what the average per square foot is. Like this thing right here is really valuable. Like it's got the lowest price, the highest price, average price in the area, average price per square foot per house. And then the map not only shows where the properties are, but it does a quick little breakdown of each one. You know, what the address is, what the picture looks like, what the price was, and all that stuff. And like I said, if for no other reason than being nosy, they'll be like, oh, look what the Smiths home sold for. You know, they told me they got 3 million. It only sold for 2.5. It came up in the last class just to preemptively catch any questions. Somebody asked, are we allowed to share this information with them because they're not our client? And Steve Perry's response, which he's a member of the board in Salt Lake, his response was, whenever you go to a listing appointment, they're not technically your client, but you're trying to win them over as a client. So you give them a CMA. Same idea here. You're acting as an agent who's trying to win their business. So you're sharing pertinent information in the market to them. So I'll blame it on him. He thinks it's okay. But that's what I like to do. It's not too lengthy. It usually only ends up being 4 or 5 pages, but it's got good data on it. And then I'll just slap a cover page on it. I'll try to find that in the next few minutes while we're talking. And it just says something about, you know, here are the homes for sale on your market or that have sold recently. Sometimes it's nice to know the value of your biggest asset. Please call me if you want a detailed analysis of your home. It just has my picture and phone number on it.
And do you put it on a Presidio folder, one of those black Presidio folders, or?
That would significantly raise the cost, so I probably wouldn't. I usually just print it out. And sometimes, depending on what mood I'm in, if I haven't gotten a listing from my farm for a while, I'll print it on black and white even, because I'm just like, I don't want to spend money on color right now. I'm sure it's worth the money, but I just do black and white most of the time, honestly. So once you have that in hand, like I said, I've never gotten a complaint, and I drop that off every other month. So people tend to like it. They tend to look at it. I'll get texts or something, like they'll say, hey, what's going on? This house says that it's 205 per square foot and all the other ones are like 105. And one of those times it was one of the head coaches for BYU whose home had sold. And I'm like, yeah, that home was, you know, marble flooring throughout the main level and had crystal chandeliers. And, you know, I'm like, it's not really comparable to most stuff in the area. So just ignore that one. But you'll know people are looking at it because they'll either look at it with you on the spot and say something like, oh, I love when you send this over. I love getting this. Or they'll text you and ask you a question. Or, you know, during the day that you do your happy dance, they'll say, hey, could you do a full-on analysis of our home? We're thinking of selling soon. And I've gotten all of those responses before. Now, what was your other question? I was glad you asked those questions because there was the one about that. And then you had one other, Carmina. Do you remember what it was?
I forgot.
I forgot to, so you're in good company.
So
Well,
I can remember.
I'll show you guys what I was going to show you while you think of other questions, because remember, I don't intend for the farming class to necessarily spill over. So any questions you have, go ahead and ask. So for the privacy of my clients, I'm not showing you my actual farm, but this is a perfect example of what I had to do for my farm. So my farm is a very boxed in area. This is the Wagon Wheel neighborhood in Cedar Hills. Most of you who live in Utah County are familiar with this. I guarantee you there's like 30 agents trying to farm this, probably none of them super effective, but it's just appealing because it's all in one spot, right? So that's how my farm is. It's just, I can easily outline it. There's not any roads. It's just all enclosed. And I'm like, I want to do this farm. And it was about 200, 250 households. And I was trying to knock it. And some days I'd get like down my road. And then all of a sudden a whole month had gone by and I'm like, oh, I only did my road. You know, maybe on a good month, I'd go down my road and another road. But then 3 months later, I hadn't knocked anything. So what I literally had to do was set all of them up on a postcard, and I kept on testing it to see how many homes I could knock on every single month. And eventually I literally only did my road. And this is a bad example because this has, if you went up and down this road, this would be like 20 houses, 25 houses. My road, because the lots are big, is literally like 12 houses. But that's all I could trust myself to effectively farm once per month. So I had the postcards out, I had the neighborhood events, all that stuff. But I'm like, I'm not going to expand the doors I knock until I'm knocking these ones effectively. And the really cool thing is, I was able to get clients off of that road pretty quickly. But once I was knocking those every month, like for, again, using this as an example, I would knock all those, and then I'd be like, okay, I've done that for 3 months in a row. I'm going to add this cul-de-sac to my knocking list. Okay, I've done that. I'm going to go and add this road to my knocking list. But I would definitely, I mean, maybe every now and then you just go on a knocking spree and knock every door. But I'd try to like laser in on a specific area that you're going to make sure you do a really good job knocking. Just like that guy in the original story, he definitely wasn't knocking 20,000 houses a month, but I'm sure he tried to knock specific ones and eventually developed a list that maybe is not just a road, but maybe a list of individuals that he wanted to stay in close contact with. So I'd recommend biting off what you can chew at the beginning and not necessarily trying to knock 200 doors a month. If you've never knocked doors, then the odds of you hitting every single one of those doors are pretty slim. So that was just one little piece of advice I hadn't thought of. So back to.
So Brian,
Uh-huh.
so in a nutshell, if I could just make a list of the different things, one would be drop off the CMA, and then another be the client events, right? And then another one would be mailers and door knocking. Well, and just drop off treats or just thing. Have I missed anything from what you've talked about?
The Facebook marketing, social media.
Oh, Facebook marketing, right? Okay.
We covered all the other ones. Can anybody think of anything she didn't mention?
Brian, I can't think of anything, but you were going to show us your cover letter or your cover of that.
Yeah, that's what I'm pulling up right now. I'm trying to find a more recent one because every time I teach this class, I can easily find one from like a decade ago, but I can't find one from recent. So I'm trying to find a more recent one. Obviously, I haven't been farming that area for a while, so if anybody wants to move in, it'd probably be pretty easy. While I'm looking for this, that's a good thing to talk about. If you're worried that somebody's farming your area already, it's really easy to find out because all you need to do is pull up a solds report for the last year and see if anybody has more than 10 or 20%. So I just pull up the full report for every home that's sold or all the active homes. And if you see the same name again and again and again, you might be like, maybe I'm not ready to take this guy on. But I've literally never had that happen in my entire coaching career. I always start with that. I'm like, okay, let's see if anybody's farming your area. And I've never had anybody higher than 10%. And I'm not saying you don't do it because there was one guy I didn't directly coach, but one of my colleagues coached. And he said that this one guy had like 30%, and it actually fired up his client. He's like, I'm going to beat this guy. What's he doing? Like, I've only gotten a couple mailers of his in the last year, so he must be knocking doors. I'm going to knock more doors. And he actually decided to take him head on, which I thought was pretty cool. But I've never had a client who's actually run into anybody. So that's just a quick piece of advice while I'm looking for this cover letter for you guys.
And now that there is specifically person farming, I think in my area, but there are several very established realtors that seem to just be getting listings without doing anything, you know, and I guess because they're just well known, people, even if they don't know them personally, they're just like, oh yeah, you know, signs of this realtor are here all the time, so I'm gonna call this person, even if they don't know them. So they're just, you know, some of them are just so well established in their names that they get phone calls no matter what. You know,
Yeah.
they get those listings.
Well, the good thing is that as you learned from that initial story about that fake realtor that got the market share in just 2 months, you can overcome that pretty quickly, no matter how established they are. Again, if they're only getting 10 or 15% of the listings, that's the huge majority of people who are not using them. So you can kind of take it to the bank that they're probably not doing anything like special mailers wise. But
Mm-hmm.
you can become the go-to in that neighborhood just by being a little bit more proactive than they're being. So go ahead and keep asking questions. I'm still looking for that cover letter for you guys. But if I can't find it, I'll literally give you word for word what it was, because I have it memorized, but I wanted to show you how it looks as well. And I'd recommend you do one that fits your personality. You don't need to do the same one I did.
So the cover letter would just say your name, the company's Presidio's name, and what else would it say? Pretty much
Without-
maybe the
yeah.
house address.
No, not their address, because again, you're printing these out by the dozens. You're
Oh,
not
that's
doing
right.
but I almost have it. I think I've got it up in this file. This is what happens when you switch computers. So while I'm looking for it, and again, the Ask the Coach hour lasts another 40 minutes, so I'm sure I'll find it at some point, but I'll just tell you exactly what mine said. Mine said, dear friends, like I didn't want it to say dear homeowners because that sounded too, official. So I said, dear friends and neighbors, sometimes whether you're planning on selling or not, it's just nice to know the value of your biggest asset. You will find in these pages a report of the most recent home sales in our area. Please reach out to me if you have any questions, or if you'd like a detailed analysis of your home. Me and my team would be happy to help you. Then it had my name, phone number, email address, and a picture of me and my team. And then it also had Presidio, obviously, because you need to be compliant. So that's pretty much word for word what it said. I still am going to try to find exactly how it looks and show it to you before the training's over. It's just escaping me right now, so hopefully I find it soon. All right, moving on. What other questions do you guys have? Oh, here's a really old one I just found. So I guess I'll pull that up right now. Wow, this was back in my equity days. This is very old. So let's pull that up for you. All right. So it just had real estate sales report, Highland, Utah. I think it's fine also to put the date, May through July or whatever period you're doing. Again, it says, I always use the same one, so this will probably be similar. Friends and neighbors, there are many times when knowing what your home is worth is helpful. I hope this report of current sales trends in Highland will be beneficial to you. If you're interested in a detailed analysis of your home, please do not hesitate to call or email me. My team and I would love to help you. Thank you, Brian Crawley. Then it had our logo down here below and a very warped, stretched out, obviously not well done picture of me and my brother at the time. That's a blast from the past for you. So there's no perfect, like I'm sure there's a way to make it sound even more genuine. This still sounds a little bit like, as I'm reading it, I'm like, I wish that sounded a little more friendly and less official. I definitely wouldn't just take a picture of that and use it. But if you want to take a picture of it and use it as a template, then obviously that's fine. I'll leave it up for a second for if any of you
Would
guys.
you be willing to send the whole packet out as a sample?
What was that?
Would you be willing to send the whole packet out as an example?
Yeah, I can send this to you. If you want a copy of this, just put your email in the chat box and I'll send it out to all of you at the end of class. This is going to look different because when you used to do the map report, it would put like 10 per page. Now it only does 6 because it puts more details and a bigger picture of the homes. But this is essentially exactly what I told you guys. It just has the summary analysis. When you go into the CMA section, you just look up summary analysis and click that box and then click the map report. And obviously with this one, I went way far out. I stopped doing that and only did my immediate farm and maybe sometimes a half a mile out later on. But this with a quick little cover letter is, again, it's just my default. I think it would probably be good to maybe mix it up and maybe you start attaching the Presidio bulletin to the back of it. That's probably not a bad idea if you're not using that as a mailer. It's usually got some good tips on it, so you could even add that to it if you want. But I'll copy and paste everybody's email from the chat box right now so I can remember to send that out to you at the end of class. And remember, if you commented before I asked you guys who had commented to text Paul for your gift card.
So you're actually dropping off a packet that's 5 pages long.
Yeah, so I had, at the time, me and my wife would just watch a movie and we'd staple them together.
Okay. And so that's thousands of pages if you've got 200, 300 in your farm.
Yeah. And again, the mailer goes out to everybody in my farm. I never got effective enough to knock every door in my farm. So I was more or less dropping these off to the doors that I knocked and maybe a little bit more if I had time to just run them up and not knock on the door. A couple of times I paid my nephews to just go and blanket the entire farm with them. And yeah, when I did that, I had to print out several hundred copies.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the question, Scott. I'm going to mail that out while you guys are thinking of additional questions, just so I don't forget to email it to you. And remember, we're not doing farming questions. I mean, farming questions are welcome, but we're now well into the Ask the Coach hour, so you're welcome to ask any question you want at this point.
What's 3 plus 2?
17.
Thanks. I was so lost on that one.
I give real estate tips, so obviously you can't count on me for math. You know I'm terrible at math.
Math is part of our job a little bit, so.
I can times anything by 3%. I just can't do any other math. It was funny. Somebody told me that joke when I was first getting into real estate. They said I can times anything by 3%, and I was like, oh, haha, that's funny. But it's actually pretty true. Like when I hear a number, especially when it comes to a house price, it's not that I can do it. I automatically do it. Like if somebody's like, yeah, I'm selling my home for $700,000. I'm like, $21,000 commission. That sounds great. Like just immediately like 3%. It's really funny. Oh, there was one more email address I'm going to add to this. Thanks, Kimber, for getting that on there. For putting that on there. All right, this should be going out to you guys now. If you for some reason don't see it soon, let me know. So I want to make sure everybody who wanted it gets it. And again, this is very old, so just use it as a guide. Farm drop. What other questions do you guys have? And I'm super okay with being productive. So if we are out of questions, I used to just kind of give tips and talk about good things to do or scripts, but I definitely don't mind you guys getting a head start on your day. So if you need to take off, feel free to do that. If you have questions or want to stick around and try to think of questions or just shoot the breeze, I'm happy to do that as well. Other than that, I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think Champions training starts on the 9th of August. So we should have one more class. I honestly can't remember what it was. I'll look it up right now actually to tell the people who are still here. But we're going to get back into Champions training again pretty soon, which is exciting to me. So hopefully you guys are planning on attending that this time around. And now I'm looking up the Presidio website to tell you what's next Monday. It's been a lot of fun. We've had probably 20 to 30% of the people attending class lately have been non-Presidio agents. So that's really exciting to me because it's fun to hear different opinions from people who might do things differently than we do, just to get other ideas. So continue to invite your friends if they want to come. We're not very aggressively marketing ourselves to people. We're just trying to add value to agents across the board. So next week we have how to be more productive than ever. So that's my class where I teach you how to utilize a custom to-do list. It's very different and unique from a traditional to-do list or an app to be super productive. And it was created based on a study of 50 self-made millionaires. So it's really cool. So that's going to be next week. And I can honestly tell you, once I started using that method, I got more stuff done off of my to-do list in a day than I previously got done in an entire month. It just makes it super easy to focus and control what you're working on and fit things in small time frames. So I definitely recommend coming next week if that interests you. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording because I think we are good for today.